My wife brought me to dinner with her German boss because she believed I could not understand their language. I smiled politely while they spoke across the table as though I were not even there. Then my wife rested one hand on her pregnant stomach and said to him in German, "Ethan is already planning the child's entire future. Once his name is placed on the birth certificate, he will never be able to walk away." Her boss smiled and replied, "Good. Let him pay for my son while you and I prepare for the life we actually want." I slowly placed my glass on the table, looked directly at both of them, and answered in perfect German. "Vielleicht sollten wir zuerst darüber sprechen, wer der wirkliche Vater ist." Perhaps we should first discuss who the real father is. The smile vanished from my wife's face. My name is Ethan Cole. I was 42 years old when one dinner destroyed the marriage I thought I had been building for nearly 7 years. Until that night, I believed my life was ordinary in the best possible way. I was a structural engineer, Marissa worked in corporate communications, and we owned a comfortable home in a quiet neighborhood outside Chicago. We were not famous or unbelievably wealthy, but we had security. We had plans. At least, I thought we did. Marissa and I met at a charity construction event 8 years earlier. My company was helping renovate a community center, and she had been hired to manage publicity for the project. She was confident, intelligent, and able to make every person in a crowded room feel noticed. At the time, I considered that quality one of her greatest strengths. Years later, I would understand that making people feel special was also how she persuaded them to give her what she wanted. We dated for a year and married in a small ceremony attended by our families and closest friends. The early years seemed peaceful. We worked hard, traveled when we could, and slowly turned our newly purchased house into a home. There had always been one empty space in our plans. We wanted a child, but after several years without one, we stopped discussing the subject every day. Neither of us completely abandoned the hope, yet we learned to build a life that did not depend upon it. That changed 10 weeks before the dinner. Marissa came into my home office early one Saturday morning holding a small gift box. Inside were a pair of white baby shoes and a positive pregnancy test. She began crying before I understood what I was seeing. Then she whispered, "We are finally going to be parents." I remember standing there without speaking, afraid that any movement might somehow make the moment disappear. When the truth finally reached me, I felt happier than I had in years. Within days, I had transformed the unused room beside ours into a planning space for the nursery. I created budgets, compared furniture, studied safety ratings, and opened a separate savings account for the child's future. Marissa laughed at my enthusiasm and told me I was behaving like an engineer. I answered that planning was how I showed people I cared. Looking back, I realize how closely she was studying me during those weeks. She asked questions about the savings account, our insurance, and whether my employer provided paid family leave. At the time, her questions seemed responsible. After that dinner, they looked very different. The pregnancy had supposedly begun shortly after our anniversary trip to Wisconsin. The dates felt slightly uncertain, but Marissa explained that pregnancy calculations were complicated. She became irritated whenever I asked for clarification, accusing me of turning an emotional experience into a mathematical exercise. I apologized and stopped asking. 2 weeks before announcing the pregnancy, Marissa had returned from a corporate conference in Vienna. Her company was expanding throughout Europe, and she had traveled with a team led by her boss, Lucas Brenner. Lucas was a German executive who had taken control of the company's North American division 18 months earlier. According to Marissa, he was demanding, private, and completely focused on business. I had never met him. Whenever I suggested attending one of her company events, Marissa said employees were discouraged from bringing their partners. When I offered to invite Lucas to her home, she claimed he disliked social gatherings. That was why her dinner invitation surprised me. "Lucas wants to congratulate us personally," she said. "He has been incredibly supportive since learning about the pregnancy." "Why would your boss be so interested?" I asked. She smiled and answered, "He values his employees. Not every kind gesture hides a secret motive, Ethan." That sentence remained in my memory because of how carefully she delivered it. She had answered an accusation I had never made. The dinner was scheduled at Adler House, an exclusive restaurant known for modern German food and private dining rooms. Marissa selected my clothes herself, rejecting 2 jackets before deciding which one made me look successful without appearing as though I were competing with Lucas. I joked that I had never known dinner required such complicated planning. She did not laugh. Lucas was waiting when we arrived. He stood as Marissa approached, and for one brief moment, something passed between them. It was not a dramatic embrace or an obvious display of affection. It was simply the way their eyes met before either of them remembered I was watching. He greeted me with formal courtesy. Lucas was 47, tall, silver-haired, and dressed with the precision of a man who expected every detail to follow his instructions. "Ethan Cole," he said, shaking my hand. "At last, we meet." "I was beginning to think Marissa had invented you," I replied. His eyes moved briefly toward her. "I assure you," he said, "I am quite real." The first part of dinner was polite but uncomfortable. Lucas asked about my engineering projects and listened just long enough to appear interested. Then he redirected the conversation toward Marissa's work. They discussed colleagues, overseas meetings, and private jokes that meant nothing to me. Marissa laughed more freely than she did at home. Lucas remembered tiny details about her preferences, including which sparkling water she liked and which foods made her feel unwell during the pregnancy. I noticed that knowledge immediately. "You seem well informed," I said. Lucas barely hesitated. A responsible executive pays attention to the needs of valuable employees. Marissa quickly changed the subject. She had spent hours preparing for the evening. Her hair was styled differently, and she wore a dark green dress I did not recognize. When I complimented it before we left home, she claimed it had been hanging in her closet for months. I believed her because believing her had become a habit. After the main course, Lucas began speaking German. He made a quiet observation about a disagreement at work, and Marissa answered him with surprising fluency. She had once told me she knew only basic German phrases. Yet she now spoke quickly and naturally, understanding every expression he used. Neither of them explained the conversation to me. They simply continued. I kept the same pleasant expression on my face while listening to every word. My mother's second husband, Otto Weiss, had been born near Cologne. He entered my life when I was 9 and became the most patient father figure I ever knew. Otto believed that language carried history, so he taught me German throughout my childhood. By the time I entered college, I could read, write, and speak it fluently. I later spent 6 months working on an engineering project in Frankfurt, which strengthened my accent and professional vocabulary. Marissa knew I had worked in Germany, but she assumed my colleagues had communicated in English. I had never deliberately hidden my fluency. It simply had not become important during our marriage. At Adler House, it became the most important fact about me. At first, Marissa and Lucas discussed harmless office matters. Then Lucas quietly asked whether I had completed the paperwork for the child's savings account. Marissa told him I had deposited $20,000 and planned to add more before the birth. Lucas smiled. "He is even more predictable than you described," he said in German. Marissa glanced at me. I kept staring at the menu as though I were trying to understand a description of dessert. She relaxed and replied, "Ethan needs to feel responsible for someone. Once he believes the baby depends on him, he will ignore anything that does not make sense." My hands became cold beneath the table. Lucas asked whether I had questioned the dates. "Only once," she answered. I made him feel guilty for asking. He has not mentioned it again. They both laughed. In that moment, the small inconsistencies of the previous year rearranged themselves into a pattern. Marissa's late meetings. Her sudden business trips. The password she added to her phone. The evenings when she returned home carrying expensive shopping bags but refused to show me the receipts. The emotional distance she blamed on work pressure. I had noticed each detail separately and accepted every explanation she provided. I had never placed them beside one another. Then Marissa rested a hand on her stomach. Ethan is already planning the child's entire future, she told Lucas. Once his name is placed on the birth certificate, he will never be able to walk away. Good, Lucas replied. Let him pay for my son while you and I prepare for the life we actually want. Their words did not immediately make me angry. First came disbelief. My mind searched desperately for another explanation, some obscure meaning I had misunderstood. But German was not the problem. I understood them perfectly. Marissa was carrying Lucas's child. They intended to make me accept legal and financial responsibility while they continued their relationship in secret. I thought about the nursery plans on my desk, the savings account I had opened, and the message I sent my mother telling her she would finally become a grandmother. Every joyful moment had been built upon a calculated lie. Lucas told Marissa they had to remain careful until after the birth. He said his position at the company and his marriage could survive rumors, but not confirmed evidence of a child. That was the first time I learned he had a wife. Marissa asked when he planned to tell her. Claudia does not need to know yet, he answered. Her family controls too much of the company. We follow the plan, secure your future, and deal with her later. Marissa accepted this explanation without challenging him. They were not speaking like two people overwhelmed by an unexpected mistake. They were discussing a strategy they had developed over months. I could have shouted. I could have overturned the table or demanded answers in front of everyone. Instead, I became strangely calm. My work had trained me to remain focused when structures failed. Panic never repaired a damaged bridge or prevented a building from collapsing. The first responsibility was to understand the failure, secure the area, and prevent additional damage. At that table, my marriage was the structure collapsing around me. I slowly placed my glass down and looked at Lucas. Then I spoke in German. Vielleicht sollten wir zuerst darüber sprechen, wer der wirkliche Vater ist. Perhaps we should first discuss who the real father is. Marissa stopped breathing for what seemed like several seconds. Lucas stared at me, his confidence replaced by shock. A server approached our table, noticed the sudden silence, and asked whether everything was satisfactory. The truth has finally arrived, I answered. That is all. The server stepped away without asking another question. Marissa spoke first. Ethan, I do not know what you think you heard. She used English now, as if changing the language might change the meaning. You said I would place my name on the birth certificate, I replied. You said I would financially support the baby because I need to feel responsible for someone. Lucas called the child his son. Her mouth opened, but no answer came. Lucas recovered more quickly. German contains expressions that can sound misleading when translated directly, he said. You have interpreted a private conversation without understanding its professional context. I turned toward him and repeated his exact words in German, matching his grammar and pronunciation. Which part did I misunderstand? I asked. He had no answer. Marissa reached across the table, but I moved my hand before she could touch it. Please let me explain, she whispered. How long? I asked. She glanced at Lucas. That single glance told me their first instinct was still coordination. Even after being discovered, they were silently deciding which version of the truth would damage them least. How long? I repeated. It was not planned, Marissa said. We became close while working together. Things grew confusing. That is not an answer. Lucas leaned back and adjusted one of his cuffs. 14 months, he said. Marissa closed her eyes. 14 months meant the affair began soon after Lucas became head of the division. It meant nearly every business trip during the previous year had carried a second purpose. It also meant Marissa had spent our last anniversary sitting across from me, accepting a gift and promising that the difficult period in our marriage was finally ending, while already maintaining another life. "What is the real due date?" I asked. Marissa shook her head. "The date is not certain." "Then give me the date your doctor provided." She remained silent. Lucas answered. "February 8th. The date struck me with almost physical force. Marissa had told me the expected date was March 23rd. She had moved the timeline by more than 6 weeks, placing conception near our anniversary trip instead of during the Vienna conference. "You changed the due date," I said. "I was afraid," she replied. "I did not know what else to do." "You knew exactly what to do. You changed the dates, studied my insurance, asked about my assets, and encouraged me to open an account for a child you knew was not mine." She began crying. Her tears would once have ended any argument between us. I hated seeing her upset, and she knew it. On that night, however, I could not tell whether the emotion was sorrow, fear, or frustration that our plan had failed. "I do love you," she said. "Nothing about our marriage was completely false." "That is not the defense you think it is." Lucas lowered his voice and tried a different approach. "Ethan, all three of us have important interests to protect. Acting emotionally will create unnecessary damage. We can discuss a private arrangement that respects everyone's needs." I stared at him. "You want to negotiate with me?" "I want to avoid a public conflict." "Then you should not have spent 14 months creating one." His expression hardened. For the first time, I saw the man beneath the polished executive manner. He was not ashamed. He was annoyed that I had become a problem he could not immediately control. I stood and placed my napkin beside the untouched plate. "Ethan, please sit down," Marissa said. "I have heard enough. We need to go home and talk about this privately." "You have discussed my life privately for more than a year. That privilege is over." I told Lucas he could handle the bill and walked toward the exit. Marissa followed me through the restaurant, calling my name loudly enough that several diners turned to watch. She caught up with me near the entrance. "You cannot leave me here," she said. "Your child's father is sitting 20 feet away. He cannot take me home. People from work might see us." Even then, her concern was appearance. "Call a car," I said. She grabbed my sleeve. "Please do not make permanent decisions tonight." I looked at the woman I had trusted for nearly 8 years. "You already made the permanent decisions, Marissa. I only learned about them tonight." I left the restaurant alone. During the drive home, my thoughts moved between disbelief and terrible clarity. I remembered dozens of moments I had dismissed because trusting my wife seemed more reasonable than questioning her. There was the company retreat in Denver when she extended her stay by 2 days because of a supposed airline problem. There was the expensive bracelet she claimed her team had given her after a successful campaign. There were the Thursday evenings when meetings always ended close to midnight. I remembered the first time I asked whether she and Lucas had become unusually close. She looked offended and told me my suspicion was insulting. I spent the rest of that evening apologizing. She had transformed a reasonable question into evidence of my supposed insecurity. When I reached the house, I went directly to my office. I did not search through Marissa's private devices or attempt to enter accounts that did not belong to me. I opened the financial records, calendars, and insurance documents we legally shared. The evidence was hidden only by my previous unwillingness to look. Our joint account showed payments to restaurants on evenings Marissa claimed to be working. Several charges were followed by reimbursements from an unfamiliar company called North Shore Consulting. I searched our shared tax records and found no legitimate connection to that business. There were hotel charges in Milwaukee, Indianapolis, and Toronto. Each trip corresponded with a conference attended by Lucas. Marissa had also transferred small amounts of money from our household account into a separate savings account. The individual transfers were easy to overlook, but together they totaled more than $18,000. Then I opened our shared digital calendar. A medical appointment had been entered under an abbreviation I did not recognize. The date was 3 weeks before Marissa told me about the pregnancy. Another appointment appeared 2 days after she returned from Vienna. The timing matched the February due date Lucas had revealed. I sat alone in the office, surrounded by documents that turned 14 months of my life into a sequence of deliberate choices. This had not been one impulsive betrayal. Marissa had created explanations, moved money, altered dates, and used my excitement about fatherhood as protection against questions. My phone rang repeatedly. First Marissa called. Then Lucas. Then Marissa again. I answered none of them. Instead, I called Olivia Grant, an attorney who had represented my engineering firm during a difficult partnership dispute. It was late, but Olivia answered because I had never called her personal number before. "Ethan, what happened?" she asked. "I need the name of a family attorney," I said. "Someone careful, discreet, and difficult to intimidate." She paused before replying. "Are you safe?" "Yes. I discovered that my wife is pregnant with her boss's child and planned to claim it was mine." Olivia did not respond immediately. Then her professional voice returned. "Do not move money, destroy property, threaten anyone, or post anything online. Preserve every record you are legally entitled to access. Write down exactly what you heard while the details remain fresh. I will arrange a meeting for you first thing tomorrow." Her instructions gave me something solid to hold on to. I created a written account of the dinner, recording the German sentences as accurately as I could remember them. I downloaded copies of our shared financial statements and saved the relevant calendar entries. Then I packed enough clothes for several days. Marissa returned shortly before midnight. I heard the front door open and close. Her footsteps stopped outside my office, but she waited nearly a minute before entering. She had removed her makeup and changed into simple clothes. Her face looked tired and frightened. Once, I would have crossed the room immediately and asked how I could help. That night, I remained behind my desk. "Are you leaving?" she asked. "For tonight." "Can we please talk before you go?" I pointed to the chair opposite me. She sat down, folding her hands over her stomach. I wondered whether the gesture was instinctive or carefully chosen. "I know what you heard sounded terrible," she began. It did not sound terrible. It was terrible. Lucas was exaggerating. He likes to speak as though he controls every situation. Did he exaggerate when he said the baby was his? She looked at the floor. "I do not know with complete certainty." "Your doctor gave you a February due date. You told me March." Her head rose sharply. "How did you find that?" "It was in our shared calendar. You hid the truth, but you did not hide it very carefully." For the first time, her expression changed from sorrow to irritation. "You had no right to investigate me." I stared at her, amazed by the accusation. "I opened our shared household records after hearing you plan to make me legally responsible for another man's child." Her anger disappeared as quickly as it had arrived. "I was going to tell you." "When?" "After I understood what I wanted." "You understood enough to change the due date." Marissa began crying again. She told me the relationship with Lucas had started during a difficult period in our marriage. She said I had become emotionally distant because of work and that Lucas made her feel appreciated. I listened without interrupting, waiting to hear whether she would accept responsibility. She did not. Every explanation placed part of the blame somewhere else. Work had exhausted her. Our marriage had become predictable. Lucas had pursued her. The pregnancy had frightened her. My desire to become a father had made honesty difficult. "You are telling me that my happiness forced you to lie?" I asked. "That is not what I mean." "It is exactly what you mean." She stood and came around the desk. "Ethan, we can survive this. Families survive complicated beginnings. You could still be the person who raises this child." Her words left me speechless. She was still offering me the role they had assigned without my consent, only now she presented it as an act of compassion. "You believe I should raise Lucas's child while you continue working with him?" "I would end the relationship." "Would you leave the company?" She hesitated. That hesitation was her answer. "Lucas says he can transfer me to another department," she explained. "We would not report directly to each other." I almost laughed at the absurdity. "You discussed your future with him before coming home to repair your marriage with me." I was trying to understand my options. "I am no longer one of your options." I picked up my bag and walked toward the door. Marissa followed me through the hallway. "Where are you going?" "A hotel." "For how long?" "Until my attorney advises me what to do next." She stopped near the front door. "You already called an attorney?" The fear in her voice was more genuine than anything else I had heard from her that evening. "Yes." "Ethan, if lawyers become involved, everything will become ugly." Everything became ugly before I knew about it. I opened the door. "Do you still love me?" she asked. I stood there for several seconds, unable to answer honestly because I no longer knew which version of her I had loved. "I love the person I believed you were," I finally said. "Tonight, I learned that person may never have existed." Then I left. The hotel room was quiet and impersonal. That should have made it uncomfortable, but the emptiness felt easier than returning to a house filled with false memories. I placed my documents on the desk and tried to organize them. Every page represented another question. How much money had Marissa moved? How long had Lucas been financing their meetings? Did anyone at her company know? Had she already completed paperwork naming me as the presumed father? Most importantly, what else had they planned? At 8 the following morning, Olivia introduced me to a family attorney named Rachel Mendoza. Rachel was calm, direct, and uninterested in emotional speeches. She listened as I described the dinner and reviewed the records I had collected. "The first priority is preventing anyone from establishing legal assumptions through false information," she explained. "You will not sign birth-related documents until parentage is independently confirmed. All communication with Marissa about finances or the pregnancy should be written and preserved." Rachel also warned me not to empty joint accounts or interfere with Marissa's access to ordinary household money. "The goal is protection, not punishment," she said. "If you act recklessly because you are angry, you give the other side an advantage." "I understand," I said. She arranged for a forensic accountant to review the suspicious transfers and advised me to rent an apartment rather than remain indefinitely in a hotel. Before the meeting ended, Rachel asked whether Lucas had made any threats. "Not directly. He suggested a private arrangement." "That may change once he realizes you will not cooperate," she said. "Do not meet him alone." Her warning proved accurate before lunchtime. Lucas sent me an email marked confidential. He expressed regret for the misunderstanding and proposed a meeting between attorneys to create what he called a mutually respectful solution. He claimed public conflict could damage Marissa's career, my professional reputation, and the future welfare of the child. The message contained no apology and no acknowledgement that he had done anything wrong. It was written like a corporate memo about an inconvenient contract. I forwarded it to Rachel without replying. That afternoon, the forensic accountant identified a disturbing pattern. North Shore Consulting, the company reimbursing Marissa's personal expenses, was connected to a vendor used by Lucas's employer. The vendor received large consulting payments despite having no clear public staff, office, or operating history. Rachel warned me not to draw conclusions from incomplete records. Still, the discovery suggested that Lucas may have been using company money to hide personal spending. If true, the affair was only one part of a larger problem. Over the next week, Marissa sent dozens of messages. Some were apologetic. Others accused me of abandoning her during pregnancy. A few sounded as though Lucas or an attorney had written them. She asked me to return home, attend a medical appointment, and continue presenting ourselves publicly as a married couple until we decided what to do. I declined. Then she changed tactics. She told mutual friends that I had become suspicious and emotionally unstable after learning about the pregnancy. She did not mention Lucas or the changed due date. Within 2 days, I began receiving concerned messages asking why I had left my pregnant wife alone. Rachel advised me not to argue publicly. Facts survive longer than rumors, she said. Let her create statements that can later be compared with evidence. So I remained silent. My silence made Marissa bolder. Through her attorney, she requested temporary financial support and claimed I had restricted her access to marital money. Bank records showed otherwise. She still had full access to the household account, and her salary was nearly equal to mine. More importantly, the financial review revealed that she had transferred $27,000 over 14 months, not $18,000 as I first believed. Some of that money had paid for travel and gifts connected to Lucas. Another portion had been deposited toward a condominium lease in Marissa's name. She had already prepared somewhere else to live. The condominium was located near Lucas's office. Its lease began 3 months before she announced the pregnancy. That discovery destroyed her claim that she had been confused and intended to confess. She had created a separate future while allowing me to renovate a nursery in our home. Rachel filed the appropriate documents to begin formal separation proceedings. Once Marissa received them, the apologetic messages stopped. Lucas's messages stopped as well. For 3 quiet days, I heard nothing from either of them. Then, shortly after midnight on a Thursday, Marissa called from an unfamiliar number. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. "Ethan?" Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Please do not hang up." "Why are you calling from another number?" Lucas took my phone. I sat upright. "Where are you?" "I am safe. I borrowed a co-worker's phone. Lucas is not behaving the way he did before." She explained that he had become furious after learning about the financial investigation. He blamed her for leaving records that connected North Shore Consulting to their expenses. He demanded that she continue claiming I was the father and accuse me of abandoning her without cause. He also wanted her to sign a statement saying the money from North Shore Consulting represented legitimate performance bonuses. "Were they legitimate bonuses?" I asked. She did not answer. "Marissa, were they legitimate?" "No." The word came out broken and quiet. She admitted Lucas had created the company with the help of an associate. It submitted consulting invoices to his employer, and part of the money returned to him through hidden payments. He used those funds to pay for travel, gifts, and the condominium. Marissa claimed she had never understood the full arrangement. She said Lucas told her the company was a legal executive expense service. "But you knew the payments were hidden," I said. "Yes." "And you accepted them?" "Yes." For once, she did not attempt to change the truth. "What do you want from me?" I asked. "I want to tell Rachel everything. I want to admit that the baby is Lucas's and explain the money. But he says he will destroy my career and makes sure I am blamed for the entire scheme." "You need your own attorney." "I do not know who to trust." "That does not make me responsible for solving this." She began crying quietly. "I know what I did to you was unforgivable," she said. "But I am frightened, Ethan. Lucas never intended to leave Claudia. He told me tonight that I was useful only as long as I followed instructions." The cruelty of his statement did not surprise me. Lucas had always treated people like resources. Marissa simply believed she was the exception. "If you are in immediate danger, contact the authorities," I said. "If this concerns legal threats or financial crimes, contact an independent attorney. Tell the truth and preserve whatever evidence you legally possess." "Will you help me?" It was the question she had been moving towards since the call began. A familiar part of me wanted to take control, arrange everything, and protect her from the consequences. That instinct had shaped our entire marriage. But rescuing Marissa again would only return me to the role she and Lucas had built their plan around. "I will not lie about you or try to harm you," I said. "But I will not protect you from truthful consequences. You need to decide whether you are finally willing to be honest without demanding a reward for it." She remained silent. "Give your attorney permission to contact Rachel," I continued. "After that, all communication goes through them." "Ethan, I am sorry. I hope one day you understand what you are apologizing for." I ended the call. The following morning, I told Rachel everything. She documented the call and contacted Marissa's attorney. By afternoon, Marissa had agreed to provide a formal statement acknowledging the affair, the true due date, and the source of the hidden payments. Rachel warned me that cooperation did not automatically mean honesty. "People often confess only the portion they believe can no longer be hidden," she said. "We verify everything." That same day, an overnight envelope arrived at my temporary apartment. There was no return address. Inside were copies of invoices from North Shore Consulting, internal approval forms bearing Lucas's signature, and photographs of him entering the condominium with Marissa. There was also a handwritten note. It contained only 2 sentences. "You are not the only spouse who has been deceived. Meet me tomorrow at 10 in the private conference room of the Blackstone Hotel." The note was signed with one name: Claudia Brenner. The following morning, I arrived at the Blackstone Hotel 20 minutes before the meeting. The envelope from Claudia Brenner remained inside my briefcase, along with the invoices and photographs she had sent. I had already given copies to Rachel, who insisted on accompanying me. "You are not meeting Lucas's wife alone," she said. "We do not know what she wants, what she knows, or whether this is an attempt to draw you into something that could later be used against you." Rachel's caution no longer felt excessive. During the previous weeks, I had learned that every apparently simple conversation could hide another purpose. At exactly 10 o'clock, our hotel employee guided us into a private conference room on the 3rd floor. Claudia Brenner was already seated at the long table. She appeared to be in her mid-40s and wore a dark business suit without any unnecessary jewelry. Her posture was calm, but the folder in front of her was filled with color-coded notes and carefully labeled documents. A gray-haired man sat beside her. "Mr. Cole," Claudia said, standing to greet me. "This is my attorney, Martin Keller. I assume the woman with you represents your interests." Rachel introduced herself, and the 4 of us took our seats. For several seconds, no one spoke. Claudia finally opened the folder. "I learned about Marissa approximately 6 weeks ago," she said. "I did not contact you immediately because I needed to verify the information and understand whether the affair was connected to financial misconduct." Her tone contained no anger. She spoke like an executive presenting the findings of an internal investigation. "How did you learn about them?" I asked. A routine audit identified payments to North Shore Consulting. The company existed on paper, but its invoices described services that no department could confirm receiving. Lucas personally approved every payment. Claudia explained that her family's investment group owned 38% of the company, employing Lucas and Marissa. She did not manage daily operations, but she served on the Financial Oversight Committee. When the payments were questioned, Lucas claimed North Shore Consulting provided confidential research for the European expansion. Claudia asked to see the reports. None could be produced. That was when she hired an independent investigator. The investigator followed the money, she continued. Some of it paid for travel, the condominium, and gifts for your wife. Other portions disappeared through additional companies. She pushed several documents across the table. They showed payments far larger than anything discovered in my household records. Over 3 years, Lucas had approved nearly $2 million in false consulting expenses. Marissa had benefited from part of the money, but she was not the only person involved. Lucas's longtime business associate, Peter Lang, controlled North Shore Consulting. Peter submitted the invoices, received company funds, and transferred a percentage back into accounts connected to Lucas. "Why send these documents to me?" I asked. Claudia studied me before answering. "Because Lucas is preparing to blame Marissa for the fraud. And Marissa is preparing to blame you for abandoning her. Both stories are incomplete. Incomplete stories become powerful when the people who know the truth remain isolated." Rachel leaned forward. "What exactly are you proposing?" "Nothing improper," Martin Keller answered. "Our clients will not coordinate testimony or exchange confidential marital information. We are offering to preserve relevant evidence and direct it through the correct legal channels." Claudia nodded. "I am not asking Ethan to help me take revenge on my husband. Lucas destroyed our marriage without assistance. I want to prevent him from rewriting events and making innocent people responsible for his choices." I wondered whether she considered Marissa innocent. Claudia seemed to read the question in my expression. "Your wife accepted money and participated in deception," she said. "That is her responsibility. But there is a difference between accepting hidden benefits and organizing a multi-million-dollar fraud. Lucas will erase that difference if it protects him." Her assessment was fairer than I expected. She did not excuse Marissa, yet she refused to blame her for crimes Lucas appeared to have committed with Peter Lang. "Does Lucas know you contacted me?" I asked. "No. He believes I know only about questionable consulting expenses. He does not know I discovered the affair, the condominium, or the pregnancy." "How did you learn about the pregnancy?" Claudia removed a printed email from the folder. Lucas had written to Peter about moving additional money before the birth of his son. He instructed Peter to label the transaction as a market research advance. The email did not identify Marissa by name, but its date corresponded with the condominium payments. Claudia's investigator later photographed Lucas and Marissa leaving a medical building together. "I confronted him indirectly," Claudia said. "I asked whether there was anything personal that could affect the investigation. He looked directly at me and said no." For the first time, emotion entered her voice. It was not loud or dramatic. It was the controlled pain of someone who had already cried in private and now had work to complete. "Lucas and I have been married for 19 years, she continued. "This is not his first betrayal, but it is the first time he used company money to support one." I did not know what to say. In many ways, Claudia and I were strangers standing on opposite sides of the same deception. We had both trusted people who considered honesty optional whenever the truth became inconvenient. Rachel and Martin agreed that future communication would pass through them. The documents relevant to my divorce would be properly authenticated before being used. Information concerning possible financial crimes would go to the company's audit committee and appropriate authorities. No public accusations. No anonymous threats. No personal confrontation. Just evidence. Before we left, Claudia asked to speak to me for one moment while our attorney stood nearby. "You should know that Lucas has been studying your professional history," she said. "He asked someone in his security department to find weaknesses he could use against you." Did he find anything? Nothing significant. That does not mean he will stop looking. Thank you for warning me. Claudia closed her folder. Lucas mistakes kindness for weakness, she said. He has made that mistake with both of us. 2 days after the meeting, the company's board placed Lucas on temporary leave. The official announcement described it as a routine response to an internal financial review. Employees were instructed not to discuss the investigation publicly. Marissa was also placed on administrative leave because her expenses had been paid through North Shore Consulting. She immediately called me. I let the call go unanswered and forwarded the message to Rachel. Marissa's attorney contacted us later that afternoon. Marissa wanted to provide a complete written statement in exchange for an agreement that I would not pursue additional claims related to the money removed from our joint account. Rachel rejected the proposal. Truth is not a product she gets to sell back to you, she explained. She must disclose relevant facts because the law requires accurate financial statements during divorce. Marissa eventually provided the statement without conditions. It was 43 pages long. According to her account, the relationship with Lucas began 14 months before the dinner at Adler House. He initially praised her work and arranged private meetings to discuss career opportunities. He told her she was being considered for a senior position and invited her to accompany him on international projects. The professional attention gradually became personal. By the time Marissa understood that Lucas had no intention of leaving Claudia, she had already accepted expensive gifts and hidden their relationship from me. Instead of ending the affair, she continued because she feared losing both Lucas and the career he had promised her. Her statement did not present her as innocent. She admitted lying about business trips, using household money, and accepting payments she knew had been disguised. She also admitted changing the expected birth date before telling me about the pregnancy. That section was the most difficult to read. Marissa learned she was pregnant several days after returning from Vienna. When she told Lucas, he reacted with panic. He insisted that a confirmed child could damage his marriage, career, and position within Claudia's family-controlled company. At first, Marissa considered raising the child alone. Lucas rejected the idea because he feared questions about financial support. Then he suggested that she convince me the baby was mine. Marissa initially called the suggestion impossible. Lucas reminded her how deeply I wanted to become a father. He argued that my desire for a family would make me accept the timeline without demanding proof. He studied my personality through everything Marissa had told him about our marriage. He knew I planned carefully, valued responsibility, and struggled to abandon anyone who depended on me. Qualities I had considered strengths became tools in their strategy. Marissa claimed she agreed because she was frightened and believed the arrangement might protect everyone. I read that sentence several times. She had not protected me. She had protected herself from making a difficult choice. The plan was more detailed than I had understood at dinner. Marissa would remain married to me for at least 3 years. During that time, I would become emotionally and legally established as the child's father. Lucas believed that even if the truth emerged later, I would continue supporting the boy because I would already love him. Meanwhile, Marissa would use part of our income to maintain the condominium. Lucas promised to leave Claudia once he secured enough money outside the company to survive without her family's influence. After his divorce, Marissa would leave me and move into the condominium. She expected to receive part of our marital assets and continuing support for the child. They had designed the next several years of my life as though my feelings, money, and future were resources they had a right to assign. Marissa ended her statement by claiming that the dinner at Adler House had not been planned as an opportunity to mock me. According to her, Lucas began speaking German because he wanted reassurance that she remained committed to their arrangement. She admitted that her cruel comments were intended to impress him. That explanation did not make the comments less painful. It only showed how easily she could humiliate me when another person's approval mattered more. Rachel asked whether I wanted to respond to the statement. Not personally, I said. There was nothing I could write that would restore the marriage or make Marissa understand the damage more clearly. The documents could speak for me. Lucas responded to the company investigation with aggressive confidence. Through his attorneys, he claimed North Shore Consulting had provided legitimate confidential services. He said Claudia was using a marital disagreement to remove him from leadership and gain complete control of the company. He described Marissa as a troubled employee who had misunderstood their professional relationship. Then he claimed I was working with Claudia to fabricate evidence because I was angry about my wife's pregnancy. The accusations contradicted one another, but Lucas repeated them with such confidence that several people initially believed him. He had spent years building a reputation as a disciplined executive. Claudia was a wealthy spouse seeking divorce, Marissa was a frightened employee, and I was an angry husband. Lucas expected the stereotypes to protect him. They might have, if not for the invoices. The audit committee discovered that several reports supposedly produced by North Shore Consulting had been copied from publicly available sources. One invoice charged the company $200,000 for research completed before North Shore Consulting legally existed. Digital approval records showed that Lucas repeatedly bypassed normal review procedures. Peter Lang then moved part of the money into accounts used to pay Lucas's private expenses. The evidence did not depend upon Claudia, Marissa, or me. It depended upon dates, signatures, and bank records. 3 weeks after his suspension, Lucas asked to meet me. Rachel immediately advised against it. If he has something legitimate to communicate, his attorney can contact me, she said. Lucas ignored that boundary and arrived at my office building on a Monday afternoon. Security called to say a man was waiting in the lobby and refusing to leave without speaking to me. I contacted Rachel, who instructed me not to meet him privately. A building manager and one of my colleagues remained present when I entered the lobby. Lucas looked different from the man I had met at Adler House. His expensive suit was still perfect, but exhaustion showed in his face. "We need 5 minutes," he said. "Our attorneys can arrange any necessary conversation." Attorneys are creating the problem. No. Your decisions created it. He glanced at the people standing nearby. "You are enjoying this," he said quietly. "There is nothing enjoyable about discovering that my marriage was part of someone else's financial arrangement." "You believe Claudia is your ally? She is using you. Once I am removed, her family will control everything. The board's investigation is not my responsibility." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Withdraw the financial claims against Marissa. State that the payments were personal gifts unrelated to company business. In return, I will ensure you recover every dollar she removed from your accounts." He was offering to return money that had already belonged to me if I helped disguise his conduct. No. Think carefully. Your reputation will not survive a prolonged public dispute. Is that a threat? It is professional advice. The building manager stepped forward and told Lucas the meeting was over. Lucas looked at me one last time. "You could have accepted a comfortable life," he said. "Instead, you chose destruction." "I chose the truth. You are experiencing the difference." Security escorted him from the building. Statements from the witnesses were forwarded to Rachel and the company's investigators. I did not post about the confrontation or contact Lucas again. His attempt to pressure me became another document in a growing collection of evidence. As the investigation continued, my divorce moved forward. Marissa withdrew her request for temporary support and stopped claiming that I had restricted her access to money. She agreed that no legal statement would identify me as the child's father without independent testing. The $27,000 taken from our household account would be considered during the division of property. Marissa also surrendered her interest in the condominium lease, which was terminated after the source of its payments became part of the company investigation. The process should have made me feel victorious. Instead, each legal success felt like removing another object from a damaged house. Necessary, but not joyful. I returned to her home once to collect the rest of my belongings. Marissa arranged to be elsewhere while I was there. The nursery door remained open. Inside were paint samples, furniture catalogs, and a wooden bookshelf I had assembled shortly after learning about the pregnancy. For several minutes, I stood in the doorway looking at the room. The child had done nothing wrong. He had not created the deception or asked to become part of it. My anger belonged to the adults who had assigned him a false father before he was born. I packed the tools from the closet but left the bookshelf. Perhaps Marissa could use it wherever she eventually raised her son. On the kitchen counter, I found a letter addressed to me. Rachel had advised me to preserve written communication, so I placed it inside my bag and read it after returning to the apartment. Marissa wrote that she finally understood I would never return. She apologized for using my desire to become a father and admitted that the plan was not simply Lucas's idea. She had agreed to it because it allowed her to avoid losing either life. She wanted the financial safety of our marriage and the excitement and career opportunities Lucas promised. I told myself that you would love the child and therefore no one would truly be harmed, she wrote. I understand now that I used your capacity to love as an excuse to deny you the right to choose. It was the first apology that did not blame fear, confusion, work pressure, or our marriage. I believed she meant it. That did not mean we could repair what she had destroyed. I gave the letter to Rachel and did not answer it. 4 months after the dinner, the company terminated Lucas for financial misconduct and referred its findings to federal investigators. Peter Lang agreed to cooperate. His records confirmed that North Shore Consulting existed primarily to submit false invoices and redirect money. Lucas continued denying responsibility until investigators produced messages in which he instructed Peter how to describe the fake services. Claudia filed for divorce shortly after the company dismissed him. Unlike Lucas, she made no public statements about the affair. Her attorneys focused on the financial evidence and allowed the legal process to establish the facts. Marissa's situation was more complicated. The company concluded that she had knowingly accepted improper payments but had not created or approved the fraudulent invoices. Her employment was terminated, and she agreed to repay the benefits she had received. Because she cooperated and provided evidence, the authorities treated her differently from Lucas and Peter. She still faced consequences, but she was not blamed for the entire operation as Lucas had threatened. As her due date approached, Marissa moved in with her older sister, Anna, in a nearby suburb. Anna contacted me once. She apologized for the messages she had sent after Marissa initially claimed I abandoned her. Marissa had finally told the family the truth. I judged you without knowing what happened, Anna said. I am sorry. I accepted her apology. She had acted on false information provided by someone she trusted. I understood that experience better than most people. The baby was born in early February, exactly when the original medical records predicted. Rachel informed me that Marissa had delivered a healthy boy named Samuel. After the appropriate waiting period, an independent test confirmed that Lucas was Samuel's biological father. The result ended any remaining legal uncertainty. Marissa sent me one message through her attorney. She wrote that Samuel was innocent and asked whether I wanted to see him once, not as his father but as someone who had briefly prepared for his arrival. I considered the request for several days. Part of me wanted to see the child whose imagined future had occupied my thoughts for months. Another part understood that meeting him could confuse boundaries that needed to remain clear. I declined respectfully. I asked Rachel to tell Marissa that I wished Samuel a safe and peaceful life, but I could not become part of it. Walking away from the child did not feel like punishing anyone. It meant refusing a responsibility other people had tried to create through deception. Samuel deserved adults who acknowledged the truth about his identity. I deserved the freedom to decide what role, if any, I could honestly accept. My divorce from Marissa became final 7 months after the dinner. The financial settlement returned most of the money removed from our joint account. We sold the house and divided the remaining value according to the agreement negotiated by our attorneys. Marissa surrendered any claim to long-term support. In return, I did not pursue additional civil claims beyond recovering documented marital funds. When the final papers were signed, Rachel shook my hand. "It is finished," she said. I expected those words to create a powerful feeling of freedom. Instead, I felt tired. Legal endings are precise. Emotional endings arrive slowly. The case against Lucas continued for another year. He eventually admitted approving false invoices and receiving money through accounts controlled by Peter. The total loss to the company exceeded $2 million. Lucas was sentenced to prison and ordered to pay substantial restitution. Peter received a reduced sentence because of his cooperation. News reports focused on corporate fraud, not the private betrayal that first exposed the financial trail. My name appeared only briefly in one article describing me as the former husband of an employee connected to the investigation. I was grateful for the limited attention. Claudia retained her seat on the company's oversight committee and supervised new financial controls. She and I never became friends, but we exchanged short messages after both divorces were finalized. Her final message contained one sentence. "We did not destroy Lucas, we stopped protecting him from the results of his own decisions." I saved that message. It helped me understand the difference between justice and revenge. Revenge would have required me to make their suffering the center of my life. Justice allowed me to tell the truth, protect myself, and continue moving forward. A year after the divorce, I left the engineering firm where I had worked for more than a decade. The decision was not caused by scandal. My colleagues had supported me, and my professional reputation remained intact. I left because the experience forced me to consider how much of my life had been organized around security rather than purpose. I opened a small structural consulting company with my former colleague, Jordan Lee. We specialized in evaluating aging schools, community centers, and apartment buildings. The work was less glamorous than designing expensive towers, but it felt meaningful. Every project involved studying a structure honestly. We did not ignore cracks because repairing them was inconvenient. We identified what had failed, strengthened what remained, and replaced what could no longer carry weight safely. I understood the value of that process in ways I never had before. I also began visiting my mother and Otto more often. They had been heartbroken by the pregnancy deception but careful not to make my recovery about their anger. Otto never asked for every detail. He simply made coffee, sat with me, and waited until I was ready to talk. One afternoon, I told him that speaking German had changed my life. "I always thought the language would help your career," he said. "I did not expect it to expose your marriage." If I had not understood them, their plan might have worked. Otto considered that before replying. Perhaps for a while. But lies require constant maintenance. Eventually, someone forgets which version they told. He was right. My knowledge of German had revealed the truth at dinner, but Marissa and Lucas had already left evidence everywhere. The language only forced me to stop ignoring the pattern. Nearly 2 years after the dinner at Adler House, my company completed the renovation of the same community center where I first met Marissa. The building had suffered from years of neglected maintenance. Cracks ran through several walls, part of the roof required replacement, and the original electrical system no longer met modern standards. For months, our team worked with contractors, local officials, and neighborhood volunteers. On the morning of the reopening ceremony, sunlight filled the restored main hall. Children ran across the new floor while their parents explored classrooms, meeting spaces, and a small library. Jordan stood beside me near the entrance. "You know," he said, "most people would look at this place and see new paint. New paint is the least important part." Exactly. The real work is hidden inside the walls. I smiled because the same could be said about rebuilding a life. Healing was not one dramatic moment. It was a collection of quiet repairs no one else could see. It was learning to trust my judgment again. It was accepting invitations without wondering what secret purpose they concealed. It was allowing another person's disappointment without immediately trying to fix it. Most importantly, it was understanding that being needed was not the same as being loved. After the ceremony, a volunteer handed me an envelope that had arrived with the morning mail. The return address belonged to Marissa's sister. Inside was a short note from Marissa. She wrote that Samuel was healthy and growing quickly. She had found administrative work at a medical clinic and was completing courses in accounting ethics and business compliance. She did not ask me for money, forgiveness, or another meeting. She simply apologized once more and said she hoped I had found peace. At the bottom, she had written one final sentence. "You were never foolish for trusting me. I was foolish for believing your trust had no limit." I folded the letter and returned it to the envelope. I did not feel anger. I did not feel satisfaction either. I felt distance. Marissa had once been the center of my plans. Now she was someone from an earlier chapter whose choices no longer controlled the direction of my life. I did not answer the letter. Some apologies deserve acknowledgement. Others are best accepted quietly, without reopening the door they arrived through. That evening, after everyone left the community center, I walked through the empty building one final time. I checked the new support beams, inspected the repaired stairwell, and switched off the lights room by room. Near the entrance, a bronze plaque listed the names of the people and companies that helped restore the building. My company's name appeared near the bottom. For years, I believed a meaningful life required building a perfect family and becoming indispensable to someone else. Now I understood that a life could also be meaningful because it was honest. I stepped outside and locked the door behind me. The evening air was cool, and the street was quiet. I thought about the dinner where everything began. Lucas's confident smile. Marissa's hand resting on her stomach. The German words they believed would protect their secret. If I could return to that table, I would not warn my earlier self or prevent the truth from being revealed. The discovery had been painful, but remaining inside the deception would have cost me far more. Otto once taught me a German expression. Die Wahrheit braucht keinen Schutz. The truth does not need protection. Lies require excuses, secrecy, pressure, and constant control. Truth only requires the courage to face it. Marissa and Lucas believed my trust made me weak. They thought my desire to protect my family would keep me trapped inside any story they created. They misunderstood me. Trust was not my weakness. Remaining where trust had been deliberately abused would have been. I walked toward my car, leaving the restored building strong and brightly lit behind me. For the first time in years, no one else had written the plan for my future. No hidden arrangement controlled my choices. No false responsibility kept me connected to people who had mistaken kindness for permission. The future was uncertain, but it belonged completely to me. Sometimes discovering a betrayal does more than end a marriage. Sometimes it reveals how much of your life was built around someone else's version of the truth. And sometimes, when that false structure finally collapses, it creates the open space you need to build something real.